Ask Reddit, what was the dumbest thing you thought as a child? I used to think that once you finished a grade in primary school you became smarter than the teacher of that grade. I used to believe that night is brought about by clouds, dark ones. Of course. Never felt the need to clarify this with anybody. It was an obvious fact. That a blowjob meant you blow air in a boy's general direction. Thanks to my older siblings for making me believe that one lol. I knew it was more than in a general direction. But I did think the phrase was fairly literal. Poor first boyfriend. That if you drink while peeing you'll keep peeing until you stop drinking. That I would have to change my name when I grew up. I don't know why. But I thought my name was suitable for a child but definitely not for an adult. And I couldn't imagine being an adult with my name. I even talked to my mother about it, saying that at some point we'd eventually have to go to court to have it changed to something more adult sounding. When I was really young, I was convinced I was pregnant, am a man BTW, with a baby cat named Bridget. My family decided to see how long I would believe this, so they never told me how ridiculously impossible that was. I went on believing it for about 5 months. That's how long little me thought cat pregnancy lasted. And then when the baby never came, I went to my mom and asked when Bridget would be born. She finally told me that boys can't get pregnant and humans can't give birth to cats. I was traumatized. Little me was so excited to be a cat father. And then it was ripped away from me. I was such a stupid kid. Edit. Since so many people keep asking. No. I never ended up getting a cat. And no, I didn't duck a cat LMAO. This would've been around 6 years old. And I was raised Catholic and thought God put babies in your stomach. So I thought he put a cat in me. And as for the name, I just really liked the name Bridget. And I still do. I thought that highways function like airport moving walkways. Imagine how fast we could go. Man in audience. What if we used 100% of the highway? When I was a young kid, maybe between 5-9, my dad took me to the tiny grass runway airport in my town. And we went on a short plane ride in a small Cessna around the valley. My dad sat in the back. And I was up front with the pilot. While we taxied off the ramp and out to the runway, I was given permission to move the yoke. I thought I was steering the aircraft the whole way. I told my mom that I taxied the plane. In school I told my class that I taxied the plane. In fact, it was so strong a memory that I grew up remembering the memory without evaluating the experience. I was home on leave from a naval aviation squadron when I was talking about that flight with my dad. And I was thinking about it. And I had this long pause. And I said, "Holy crap. Dad. I just realized that I wasn't steering that Cessna." My father laughed his ass off. I believed hamburger and hot dog buns were only available for restaurants, not civilians. Mom used sliced bread, toasted to obliterate the gums, at home to make burgers and hot dogs. I believed that until the age of 10. Can you imagine? Such dangerous items in the hands of the untrained public? Better leave it to the professionals. I remember watching the movie Cocoon with my grandparents. I could not have been more than 4. For some reason I deduced that in order to become adults, children had to die in these pool cocoons and be reborn old. I freaked my cousins out and had a whole group of kids crying at a holiday party over our impending doom. Ruined Christmas pictures that year. Are you by chance a caterpillar? I was under the impression that there were tiny rats that lived inside of my stomach, and when they ran in their wheels for exercise it would make me need to pee. What the duck? I was very young and I blame Wizard of Oz, but I believed that a tornado was just one big phenomenon that continuously happened and spun from state to state, country to country. I also live in the South, so we have frequent tornado warnings, so I vaguely remember a time we had 2 or 3 warnings in 1 week and I was scared the single tornado would come to our town and never go away. That there's a tiny human inside the TV who executed what the remote was telling him to do. For example, when you press the button to increase the volume, He is being hit in a specific way that lets him know that he has to go and manually increase the volume. I imagined a barracks full of tiny men living in the tap who poured out little buckets of water when I used the sink. That if people are going to study something, they just sit in a circle with other students and think about what they want to do. As soon as they find out, they are done and they can leave. I wish LOL. I like the way younger you thought. Though we'd have too many Lego engineers if that was the method. I always thought that kids were born with your crap. So one day you would go to the toilet and take a dump, and then if you looked down there would be a child. And I thought that if you didn't check you might accidentally flush the baby. My older siblings told me that mom crapped me out and tried to flush me down, but I managed to crawl out. It explained why I was a naturally good swimmer. I thought that there would be a baby inside every girl's stomach as soon as she is born, and inside that baby's stomach too there would be a tiny baby. The cycle goes on and on. And that the baby keeps growing as we grow, and after getting married the doctors will cut the stomach and take the baby out to make space for another baby. My uncle is a priest for an obscure Hindu offshoot religion, and he told me quite young that I shouldn't play sport because each person only gets a set number of breaths in their life, and getting out of breath used them up quicker. I used to spend hours laying in bed trying to make my breaths as long and slow as possible. In fairness, I actually have a decent lung capacity as an adult, so maybe it had a positive effect. Jeez. That had to scare the hell out of you. Good breathing technique for relaxing. But not if you're afraid you're going to die. I thought if you left a video game on then a character would come out of the TV and kill you. I was a bit paranoid as a small kid. Building on that paranoia, I thought those for sale by owner and the existence of just for sale signs implied that many houses were for sale not by owner. I thought sometimes a random person came to your house and put it up for sale without your consent. Little did I know I had discovered the concept of foreclosure. I was vaguely aware of a TV show called Ironsides, about a lawyer in a wheelchair. Whenever I heard the word paralegal, I thought it meant a paraplegic lawyer. It made sense to me that people in wheelchairs could make excellent lawyers, based on the nature of the job and their physical limitations. That the local mosque in my city was Aladdin's vacation home. Over there's the bakery. That over there is the bank. Excuse me? Oh. That? Haha. Well, that's Aladdin's vacation home. Similarly, I didn't realize there was anything supernatural about God and Jesus. I just thought they were a father and a son around my own age at the time, that lived in the cathedral nearby. Just like my mom and I lived in an apartment together. That the Underground Railroad was a literal secret underground subway-style steam engine that Harriet Tubman was the conductor of. I felt terrible as a kid to eat. I wouldn't eat in front of people, and every meal I would find myself thinking poor food getting eaten because I was convinced they had emotions. I used to believe that people that spoke other languages translated their language to mine in their head. Grandparents were assigned to families. Like, I didn't know my grandma was my dad's mom. Same. I remember asking my mom, why did Uncle Greg call Grandma Mom? That if April was a month, Ninja Turtles must also be a month. Clearly this one by logic is true. Lousy Leonardo Weather. Own 2 credit cards and use them to pay for each other for infinite money. That if you poked your belly button too hard then it would come open like a plug and all of your internal organs would spill out. I thought that the hockey player Peter Talianetti was actually 2 people. A man named Pete Talley and his sidekick Eddie. That babies were inside their mom's literal belly. If she swallowed a cherry tomato whole I thought it would land and bounce on the baby's head. That beyond my country was nothing. I believed that the map of the earth that we knew was only half of the earth. And the other side of the earth was some dark and mysterious place that was constantly in nighttime and that no human had ever been. I once told my mom I wondered what was on the other side of the world, and she was like, "What?" If a man kisses a woman for a long time the woman is pregnant. I wasn't afraid of being on a plane and it crashing because I thought that as long as I could get to the window/door quickly, I could just jump out the second before it hit the ground. I grew up around the time of the release of the Star Wars prequels. I vividly remember asking my brother as to why they released the sequels. New Hope, etc. Before the release The Phantom Menace, as it made no sense when I was 11 and a prequel was a wild new concept to me. He had me convinced. Embarrassingly until I was about 15/16 that the reason they released the sequels first was because there was a fire at the studio and it burned all the original tapes, so they had to reshoot them. I was so ducking dense. Lived in Germany for a few years. My dad convinced me that windshield wipers were called Flip and Flow. Pen Muckenskreeters. This was pre-Google Translate. My grandpa used to call dogs Woofenbarkers. I am German. I will from now on call my Skyben Whisker Flip and Flow pen. I thought Wichita, Kansas was where all the witches lived. I also thought Jefferson County was where the Jeffersons lived. Not something I believed, but a harmless prank I used to play on my kids. There is a highway we use that has several long, gentle curves over a 5-6 mile stretch. One day when my younger son complained that the sun was in his eyes, he was about 3 at the time, I had the idea to pretend that I had a personal relationship with Mr. Son. I saw that the highway was going to curve. So I had a conversation with Mr. Son, explaining the situation and asking him to please move over so that he wasn't shining in my son's eyes. I drew out the conversation and timed it so just when Mr. Son agreed, we would start the curve and it looked like he was moving over and out of my son's eyes. Then after another curve, the sun would be in my other son's eyes. So I asked politely for Mr. Son to move again, just as we went around the next curve. This went on for almost a year before my wife explained to them what was going on. It was hilarious in the meantime. Edit. A word. My dad lost his wedding ring in the bay during a fishing trip. He'd lost weight. His hand was wet and probably fish slimy. And it just fell right off and was lost forever to the water. I was absolutely inconsolable. It took my parents quite a while to get me to calm down enough to be able to explain why I was so upset about it. I thought it meant they were no longer married anymore. LOL. When you have a baby you have to push one of your testicles out and it became the baby egg. I had no idea how I was my parents' third child. I was my daddy's third testicle. That my head was a rock. Curious as to how you found out that was a lie, LMAO. When I saw a friend crack his skull after slipping on ice. I thought you could only get diarrhea when you had a fever, as the fever would melt your normal poop. The inside of my stomach was another village with their own villagers. Every time I drank, it rained. Every time I ate, it fed the people. A tummy ache was because the villagers were unhappy. Hey, that's the gut biome. Yeah, instead of a few villagers you have trillions. My parents gave me a book about the birds and the bees that was illustrated. They showed a couple in bed in the missionary position. In that same book, there was a picture of a man's erect penis, which was shown as parallel to the floor as he stood. The book didn't explain that the penis is somewhat flexible. There was a diagram of the vagina and uterus but no picture showing the naked woman. I didn't have any sisters and my parents weren't the kind of parents that walked around naked or semi-naked, clothed at all times. For the longest time I thought I was deformed. My vagina was between my legs when those pictures made it look like it should be on my stomach. I was horrified and I would scream if anyone opened the bathroom/bedroom door while I was changing or using the bathroom because my deformity would be discovered. Edited because perpendicular and parallel are different. Editing because I am astonished by how many of us thought our bodies weren't normal. Giant group hug. We're all okay now. I used to think that the sunlight rays piercing through overcast days were how new Power Rangers were selected. I wanted to be a Power Ranger really badly. So I was always sad when I couldn't be in a ray. Well, I thought that Delaware was a supermarket chain. In my defense, I'm not American. And I was like 10. Didn't have world geography at that point except for point to the USA. Now point to Australia. Still think it would make for a nice enough supermarket name though. I used to think my mom was such a good shopper. She would pick out all these groceries. And when she got up to the checker, she would only give them one piece of money. And they would give her several pieces of money back and we got to keep the groceries. That man was so stupid. Mommy, you gave him $100 bill. And he gave us back 3 $1 bills. There was an old kid's book or poem or something where a kid does this. Someone gives him $1. And he trades it for 2 quarters, because 2 is more than 1. Then 3 dimes. Etc. He comes back with a handful of pennies and is super proud of himself. People that died in movies really died. That the world actually used to be black and white like it was in old movies. And even asked my mom what it felt like when all the colors suddenly appeared. I used to think adults were in full control and knew exactly what they were doing. I thought the Christ on the crucifix at my elementary school was a cool man reclining on a hyper-modern, minimalist space vessel. Took him from the wall during break and made him soar through the room, dramatizing his mid-flight with epic lip-generated engine sounds. Just when I staged his collision with a sandwich, the teacher came in. If you turn on the light in the car, you'll get arrested or might die. Wow, you are so wonderful for listening. Hit like button and subscribe for more daily stories.